Hello comrades, it's Comrade Reese here, and today I'm just going to do a short video that kind of just explains to you all why Marxism-Leninism is such a practical ideology. For anybody who has no idea whatsoever, Marxism-Leninism is a socialist doctrine that was created by Vladimir Lenin. Marxism-Leninism contains the theoretical knowledge of Marxism and the organisational tactics of Leninism. In this video, I'm just going to give you a brief explanation of both Marxism and Leninism so that you can kind of see why they are so compatible with each other. The ideology of Marxism was founded by Karl Marx. Marx was an excellent political thinker who analysed our history through something called dialectical materialism. Dialectical materialism is basically a Marxist perspective of human history, and an incredibly scientific one as well. Dialectical materialism shows us how different class systems worked throughout history. It can even be used to analyse our modern capitalist society, and even future societies like socialism and communism. I can't really think of an easier way to explain dialectical materialism to you than this. Throughout our history, there has been something called class struggle, and this can be seen from slavery all the way on to full communism. First of all, let me just list all of the class systems in chronological order. First off, we have slavery, and then we have feudalism, then we have capitalism, then we have socialism, and finally we have full communism. If you were living under slavery, the system of slavery served the slave masters against the will of the slaves. If you were living under feudalism, the system of feudalism served the nobles and the lords against the will of the peasants by using knights. We are now living under capitalism. The system of capitalism serves the capitalists against the will of the workers by using the police and the military. If you were living under socialism, the socialist system serves the working class against the will of the overthrown capitalist class by using the police and the military. Finally, we have communism, and realistically, the only time communism would be implemented is when socialism has served its purpose, when it has defeated the overthrown capitalist class. Communism is a stateless, classless and moneyless society. It is a system that has never been accomplished yet, but it is what humanity is actually working towards. It is the final goal of the human race. However, like I've just said, this will only come at the time of the final defeat of the bourgeoisie. But there will be no final defeat until capitalism has been overthrown in at least the overwhelming majority of the world's countries. When Marxists talk of full communism, this would really come in a hypothetical future, like hundreds, maybe even thousands of years in the future. Marxists also use the term dictatorship to describe a certain class system. Now, in school, I was always taught that democracy and dictatorship are mutually exclusive. Basically, that there is a straight line between most democratic and most dictatorial. And this kind of education is purely the reason why people in capitalist countries get so offended to hear the word socialism. But when we Marxists use the term dictatorship, we don't mean the dictatorship of one person over everyone. What we really mean is the dictatorship of one social class over another. The best way I can explain it to you all is with the phrases dictatorship of the bourgeoisie and dictatorship of the proletariat. The term bourgeois means the capitalists, and what the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie means is the dictatorship of the capitalists over the working people. The term proletariat means the working class, and what the dictatorship of the proletariat means is the dictatorship of the working people over the capitalists. So, in essence, this is basically what dialectical materialism is. It is a theoretical and scientific analysis of the history and also the future of humanity. This is what Marx wrote in the Communist Manifesto. if you read the Communist Manifesto, you will see that Marx and Engels did exactly that. They analysed not only the modern capitalist world, and I know that the Communist Manifesto was written back in the 1800s, but Marx's analysis of the capitalist system is just as relevant today in the 21st century as it was back in the 1800s. Capitalism officially became a system at around about 1825. It was the system that came after the destruction of feudalism. A good example of the destruction of feudalism was the French bourgeois revolution in 1789. It was a very historic revolution, as it ended the feudal aristocracy in France and replaced it with capitalism. While the French bourgeois revolution was not a workers' revolution in the slightest, Marxists everywhere actually took a lot of inspiration from the French Revolution, as it put an end to the rule of one class and replaced it with the rule of another class. We had our own bourgeois revolution here in Britain too, which was led by Oliver Cromwell back in the 1600s. It did remove the overall power of the British royal family, but it did not finish to quite the same end as the French Revolution did, because the French bourgeoisie, more daring than any other bourgeoisie in the world, put the heads of the king and the queen on the guillotine and said, to hell with you, we're going to get rid of the old filth. Another thing that Marx did was that he analysed the present system, the capitalist system. He analysed how it is a flawed system for the simple reason, the way it works. It soon produces goods that nobody can buy. Marx saw, through his analysis of the capitalist system, that capitalists do not produce for the fun of it. They do not produce because we need the things that they produce. Capitalists really produce just to make money. This left Marx with a big question. How do the capitalists actually make money? Who are the biggest buyers of the merchandise? Through Marx's study of capitalism and how it works, he was able to find that the biggest buyers of the products that capitalists sell are the ordinary workers. Marx saw that capitalists employ workers, and we still see that today, but what Marx analysed was that when the workers get employed, they work, they add new value, they only get part of that new value that they have labour to produce, pay to them as wages, and the rest of it goes to the capitalist. This is what Marx analysed, and it is also definitely something that can still be seen under capitalism today. Now, Marx's analysis of the capitalist system didn't stop there. He also saw that the capitalists can only use part of that new value for their personal consumption, because even the most greedy capitalists cannot eat 100 chickens, even the most greedy capitalists cannot live in 200 houses for the same night, and even the most greedy capitalists cannot have 300 cars for the same day. This means that most of the new value then goes towards productive consumption, like setting up establishments which make more money. But Marx analysed that in order for these establishments to survive, the capitalists have got to be able to sell, and the workers have got to be able to buy the products that the capitalist is trying to sell. However, Marx then saw that ever since capitalism became a system, and the fact that it constantly impoverishes the working class, that it witnesses an endless series of crises of overproduction when things cannot be disposed of. Marx also analysed how this later alienates working people under capitalism, because he saw that in the industrial production system under capitalism, workers have no control over their work and thus lose control over their lives. This causes working people to stop being autonomous beings in some sense, leaving them to feel like a sort of reject or not a part of society, which is why you would also see gun violence in the United States, knife crime in Britain, and suicides in Japan today. It is also the reason why certain types of music like punk, heavy metal and rap started to appear throughout the 1980s and the 1990s in capitalist countries, particularly in the First World. This alienation also was the cause of Gothic and emo trends to start appearing during the 1990s and the early 2000s. And it also is the leading cause of some workers turning to drugs or alcohol, as well as mental health problems like depression and anxiety. What this alienation really does is that it makes workers angry at the capitalist system in some way or another. Before I was employed at my first job as a catering assistant, I had definitely heard of socialism. I had heard of the Communist Manifesto, but I didn't exactly know what socialism was until I started studying Marxism. What led me to begin studying Marxism was when I had started working for a capitalist, because in a way you could say that I had become alienated by the system, which was what pushed me to become a communist. This is why Marxism is just as relevant today as it was back in the 1800s. While Marxism is very theoretical and can definitely be studied when looking at the capitalist system, Leninism is a bit more militant and practical. Leninism consists of the organisational tactics that you would find within a communist party, namely Democratic Centralism and Vanguardism. The real name for Leninism is Marxism-Leninism, and this theory was created by Lenin. Vladimir Lenin created the theory of Marxism-Leninism by becoming heavily influenced by Marx and rigorously studying Marxism. Lenin also made an analysis of imperialism and how it is the highest stage of capitalism. He solved the misconception that surrounds imperialism too, as people do tend to think that all that there is to imperialism is simple military conquest, the building of an empire. However, what Lenin did is that through his analysis of imperialism, he shows us that in the Marxist-Leninist understanding of the word, it actually means much more than that. Lenin's analysis of imperialism showed him that imperialism really means to take over another country's natural resources, you utilize their cheap labour and take over their markets. Notice how all of these actions are economic and political, not military. But Lenin's analysis didn't stop there. He also showed that the only time imperialism would require military conquest and violence is if it cannot achieve these things in any other way. Now, military conquest is not really the point. It's only a means to an end. The ultimate goal is economic exploitation, and military conquest merely facilitates this exploitation. For example, if we were to look at imperialism in the 21st century, we can definitely see what Lenin was saying, because the Western imperialist countries own most of the world's wealth. They exploit cheap third world labour. They dig minerals and oil from poor countries at very low prices, and they dominate the global markets. Aha, now you get it. Lenin also showed that even though imperialism in itself is really an economic activity, some imperialist countries do engage in constant imperialist wars to further their economic interests, most notably the United States of America and Britain. Lenin created this theory of Marxism-Leninism by putting together his study of Marxism and his analysis of the organisational tactics like Democratic Centralism and Vanguardism to create this theory. He made his theory of Leninism fully compatible with Marxism, which is why he was able to combine these two theories to create Marxism-Leninism. For those of you who may be new to socialism or not very savvy with politics, I'll just briefly explain what democratic centralism means and also what vanguardism means. Democratic centralism means to give every single member of the Communist Party a choice to have their own opinions and vote for what they want whilst a discussion is taking place. But once a discussion has come to an end and everything has been decided upon, every single member of the Communist Party must uphold the rule of the majority or face being expelled from the party. Now, at first glance, you may think that this is slightly harsh, but the real reason why Lenin had thought of this organisation tactic was to combat opportunism and revisionism. Democratic centralism is in place within the Communist Party to kind of prevent the Communist Party from basically being a loosely organised club open to anybody who feels like signing up. And it's also in place to prevent people in the Communist Party from basically one day wearing the party's badge and the next just doing their own thing. Vanguardism is pretty much the leadership within the Communist Party. Vanguardism is a tool that is used to direct and raise the consciousness of the working class so that it can direct all of its work towards establishing socialism in the most effective and correct way, as opposed to being spontaneous about everything, as it involves the working people being led by the most class-conscious members of the working class in a communist party. Because in the working class, particularly in the imperialist countries, people are so divided. You would have a wing of working class people who are extremely nationalistic and pro-imperialist, like your typical English Defence League type of people. You would then have a wing of working class people who are very class conscious, like the workers in the Communist Party. Then you would have a wing of working class people who are fallen for liberal identity politics. And then you would have a wing of working class people who don't really know or don't really give a shit about what's going on. This is why you are more likely to see a farmer or a sweatshop worker in the third world sign up to join a communist party, grab a rifle and fight against the government, rather than a construction worker or an office worker in the first world. Because whilst both workers in the first world and also in the third world are indeed exploited by the bourgeoisie, the workers in the third world suffer much worse conditions than workers in the first world, as they tend to live on just under $2 a day, working in a sweatshop that is owned by the bourgeoisie in the Western countries. And if they're not working in a sweatshop or a farm, they're more than likely being bombed by the US military. This is why there is generally much more of a desire for revolution in the third world than there is in the first world. Anyway, back to the point. Vanguardism is when the working class is led by the most class-conscious workers and educated in the best way possible to basically be able to see right through the capitalist class, if you like. It's basically getting them to the point of noticing the hypocrisy within the bourgeoisie of the imperialist countries. And I'm sure I'm not in the minority when I say this, because the British bourgeoisie, along with the US bourgeoisie, is claiming that the anti-imperialist leaders in Africa, Asia and the Middle East are mass murderers. And the Japanese imperialists have also begun lecturing North Korea about human rights. But if you look hard enough, you will find that the mass murderers are not in Africa, they are not in the Middle East, and they are most certainly not in East Asia. They are on our doorsteps in the imperialist countries. To summarise, comrades, the reason why Marxism-Leninism is such a practical ideology is because Marxism and Leninism are two ideologies that are so compatible with each other. They fit together like a jigsaw. Marx studied the capitalist system and analysed it day in, day out. Through that study, through the concrete situation that was in front of him, he found that the solution was scientific socialism. Lenin was heavily influenced by Marx. Therefore, he studied and analysed Marxism day in, day out. Through that study, through the concrete situation that Marx had placed in front of him, Lenin was able to not only analyse capitalism enough to show that imperialism was its highest stage, but he also made his own theory of Leninism, consisting of militancy and organisational tactics to prepare for revolution. By doing that, he made Leninism fully compatible with Marxism to create Marxism-Leninism. In other words, when you combine the theoretical knowledge of Marxism with the militancy and the organisational tactics of Leninism, you've got yourself a recipe for a revolution right there.